Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Really excited to be here. It's been a wonderful day of learning how you guys think, and certainly I'm excited to chat more.
For the benefit of the audience, can you maybe just introduce what BinanceUS is?
Sure. So BinanceUS is a US-based marketplace, digital asset-based marketplace that is here to deliver the freedom and diversity of assets that the US market is demanding. So we are bringing the best technology that the globe has validated, bringing that, licensing it, and bringing it to US users.
And how did you get into this role? And what's your background that led you to where you are today?
I've always done things differently, and so it definitely started before I met the CFO of Binance on a bus in Singapore a year and a half ago. But the idea of building out infrastructure and helping more than just a certain area of early investors get into a space has been something that I've cared about for quite a while. I began my journey into markets jumping into Hong Kong and being a foreign exchange trader with Morgan Stanley, because I knew that there was something that I didn't understand, and I wanted to make sure that others could understand it better. And so I constantly throw myself into situations to be able to be a better liaison back to my peers or my family or others around me that might not have that experience but need to be aware of what it's like.
What drew you to Binance as an organization? I mean, you had a lot of choices, and so what attracted you?
Yeah, I had a lot of choices, but also running into someone on a bus might just be fate. So the idea of when I first got into crypto, the understanding was mostly a painful frustration that I felt. I wanted to fix the problems that I had with the system. With crypto, we were laughing over in the corner about I taught my father how to use a Ledger Nano, and he goes, the numbers are so small. And I said, okay, well that's good user feedback, how can we improve upon it? So I'm constantly trying to iterate on what we can do better, and I found that accessing crypto was still difficult, and accessing a diverse selection through fiat currencies, mine being dollar at that time, was also difficult. So I knew we had some room to improve upon that process. And what we're doing at BinanceUS is taking the feedback and humanizing the experience. One of the greatest things that we can do is hear what's been working for people and innovate on it. So we've had 7 years of crypto exchanges in the United States already. Why do we not have it? What's missing? What do we really need as an industry in order to change, to get full adoption that will allow many other these projects to have that scale that they need in order to be successful?
Yeah, I think usability is really a key focus, and one of the things that makes usability a little bit more difficult is I think it's localized, right? There's a lot of cultural context that goes into making something truly usable. And so I'm curious, BinanceUS is pretty new, right? You launched
a month
ago, right? But in the experience that you've had so far, how has serving the US market been different than serving the international market? Are US traders demanding different products? Do they have different interests, or is it roughly pretty similar, from a usability perspective or from a product perspective?
Right. From a product perspective, it is very different. You can agree that there are some elements that are non-negotiables traders around the world will want and need. That's the speed of execution, security, information that you can get from the website, as well as price discovery. All of those components are kind of standards that we have to have. But the elements that are a little bit more flexible, or as you say, localized, come from nuances of the market. The risk appetite in Asia has been one of insane gambling. They love the fast-moving, the multiple promotions, the kind of deals on deals that keep popping up on the website. And I knew that that would not flow well with most of my American counterparts. So we simplified the website to be pretty streamlined. It's a static page. When you enter, you're able to see the prices, you're able to see the charts, very clean. To be able to just translate that's what the US clearly has been and seems to be wanting in their crypto product offering. So being able to provide a certain element that the US knows that we're listening and adapting our platform to their needs is something that I care about dearly.
So simplifying the offering and maybe fewer notifications, that kind of a thing?
A little bit, yeah. Fewer the pop-ups. Not everyone appreciates that little clicking box that shows up all over and makes you chase around the screen. You want it to be simple. You want the understanding of when there is an error, what's popping up. I want a countdown when I've got an ACH deposit. If you've got to hold it for 10 days, tell me when on day 6 I can start withdrawing. So there's certain elements that I just want to be intuitive for the user, because the space that we're creating is not one that's naturally intuitive, or we would all been in here 10 years ago. So the idea that we can take a different type of user and apply is what Binance has done really well. I'm able to talk to both an institutional investor as well as mom and pop. For instance, I had feedback from a trucker, and he said, I really hate that you don't have an app. I'm on the road the whole time and I trade on the fly, and if there's not an app, then I can't be active in crypto. And I'm going, God, I love that truckers in America are using crypto as a means to hopefully not keep their eyes off the road, but engage in access to capital growth that they've not been able to have before because of their profession. So that to me allows this freedom for people to activate their own capital growth at the same time, follow what they need to do.
So on that note, you're mentioning some of these more retail type users, and then you also mentioned the needs for institutional traders and institutional investors. Does BinanceUS plan to serve both? Do you optimize for one over the other?
I kind of always say the institutions know what I'm up to because I update my LinkedIn. But I've been institutional my whole career prior, working at Morgan Stanley, covering some of the largest global macro hedge funds and their FX movements. I keep tabs on them, they keep tabs on me, and we want to make sure that we're both educating the partners along the way. They were skeptical when I first moved into crypto and said, oh no, you dove off the deep end and got in it. And then sure enough, they say, okay kid, you might be right. And then here at Binance, they're going, okay, now you're building something for us. Well, we want to have an input in what gets built out. So I'm very keen to understand how we can make something work for all party types. You've got, whether it's APIs that most of our market makers are already using, whether you've got an intuitive platform that people can learn from or begin to build out, whether you can even bring it down to a scale where it's just a click, easy one-click buy sell. Those are all elements where we can figure out exactly what the US needs in order for this adoption to take place. I think that I've had a week right now, or I'm kicking off a week. Yesterday I got to speak to some grad students that were very much involved in watching policy and beginning to understand it. Today I get to talk to you guys and learn a little bit more about how institutional investors are already in the space. I don't think anyone in here has ever not heard of Bitcoin, so that's a good improvement of a room. Tomorrow I'm speaking to the STEM professors of my high school. So I'm trying to learn what are the steps that we're missing that are getting people to be familiar with the space and understand the key components they need to have for the curiosity, but also the ability to understand and innovate on crypto and digital assets.
I mean, I think it's really cool that you're going and talking to all of these audiences, because it's all about expanding the pie more than it is about taking market share from existing incumbents, right?
Yeah, there's plenty out there, but it also, I think that feedback loop is something that's been missing. There's a human factor that we forget about in digital assets, that while we might be hiding behind our computers trading, this is all humans interacting with humans, except for Helium, which is interacting with scooters. So the component of us not making it a tangible process or one of understanding means we're going to build something that only robots will be able to use. And I frankly care more about the human factor, because I'm going to be here for a little while.
So, speaking of some of these products that you're offering, I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about how the products that you offer differ, right? Like, obviously, you don't list all the same things, you may not have all the same other product offerings like the derivatives and the margin trading that exists on Binance.com. How do you see that differing right now? And do you expect that to become more similar over time, or do you expect it to stay very different?
Yeah, I'm at such an advantage and a privilege. I cannot say that many people, or myself at least, have not come into a position where I have a global brand and a library of technology that works and has product market fit. So the ability to license the technology from Binance.com, I'm able to take off exactly what we need at this time and then scale into it when I feel we're ready for it. That said, there are so many components to Binance's ecosystem I could use already, and yet I'm pushing back and saying, I really want us to get scale first in a spot market, get people comfortable with how you can bring dollars into a system of digital assets before we start complicating this and alienating certain groups. I think there's an element of education, not intimidation, that we really need to focus on before we start rolling out, binary options on crypto. And that's, I think it's fantastic we keep developing that and keep focusing on how we do get there. But for the scale that we can build out, it'll only make the rest of the story for us easier.
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult dichotomy, right? Because you have to serve the very new entrant, be able to simplify things for them, but then you also have the users that are really advanced, and they want all the advanced products, and they want all of the listing pairs, and they want all of these various things. And it can be difficult to offer both in the same platform.
It can, but I figured it out, so if I can do it, a little girl from Orlando, Florida, I hope that I can make a few others understand it. The idea for us to not be the gatekeeper for a lot of these assets is an important one. I think there's a freedom that we're putting the venue for folks, but not necessarily making the choices on what is a good or what is a bad project or coin. Or we're not being that type of gatekeeper, but we do want to provide an aggressive amount of pairs for people to make their own choices. That's something that I think has been the hurdle that we've seen in financial assets prior, that choices are made on behalf of you for other reasons. That freedom for you to access markets has always been limited. So if we can do our best part to provide a compliant marketplace for you to feel comfortable belonging to and engage with, then that choice is really up to you to decide on what you'd like to access.
So I have another question on BinanceUS, but then after that I'd like to ask you about Binance proper and kind of what it's like working there. But before we do that...
Well, I work for BinanceUS. Might not be able to tell you.
So on BinanceUS, what are some of your longer term ambitions for BinanceUS? What do you hope to accomplish over the next few years?
Yeah, everything is a long-term ambition when you've only been working on the project for about 4 months and live for a month. So to complete the year would be a wonderful thing. I kind of gave myself a 72-hour, we're going to be okay or we're going to be dead in the water when it first launched, and sure enough, those 72 hours went through, and I said, we're going to make it. But in crypto, you never know, so we have to play nimble and continue to assess the situation. Things I think that are going to happen that we really need to focus on is understanding how this current environment is going to be engaging in digital assets and how it's going to be impacting their lives. I think clearly applications, phone, mobile, making it accessible from a standpoint, that's really how the world operates now. It was almost archaic for us to list a desktop website first. However, it's easier, and we didn't want to waste time waiting for our development to take place. The other element that I think is important is being able to make sure that the education component is clear. So having the access is one thing, having the education for people to make the right choices is the other. So really preparing folks for the ability to know what to do when they are feeling comfortable to do it is the progress that we want to make. I want everyone to kind of know where their earthquake kit is, even if they don't know when the earthquake is going to happen. So access on BinanceUS is something that I think is an important factor for us to get. And then being able to build out from there what type of functions we really are wanting from the market. An element that we don't really bring up, probably because it's too FX nerdy, and there are not many of us out there, but is the idea of corporates being able to engage in digital assets. Well, the main reason why corporates don't like engaging in risky assets is they usually have a balance sheet they worry about and have to hedge that exposure. So as we see products coming into market that will allow for us to hedge balances, it's not necessarily as much as excitement as, oh, I'm being leveraged and I'm speculating on something that I can have a higher return on. It's also allowing for different types of users to enter this market, which we forget. Corporate flow is about 40% of the foreign exchange markets. So for us to be attempting to grow something that's going to have an organic two-way appetite without that native natural need for this, we're going to have a difficult time. A lot of chasing our own tail. So I think that's those elements of building out an infrastructure that both welcomes people and creates new environments for people to allow for balances to be monitored, something that's really important way out there.
Are you seeing some interest from corporates now on anything, or is it still a little bit further out?
It's still further out. I mean, it's hard to convince corporates to hedge their own FX, frankly. So there's still a lot of companies, startups included, that are still using dollars to pay people halfway around the world. Time is money to some people, and they don't really care about the exposure difference. You see it show up on earnings calls every single quarter. They had a great year, except for that FX balance. B&L really rocked, took 3/4 of the profit away. It's a hard lesson to learn, and one that people aren't comfortable with because it involves a huge amount of expertise and at the same time a platform and acceptance where fees aren't taking most of your reason for hedging.
Yeah, getting comfortable interfacing with capital markets.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do business in Indonesia, did you really want to pay about 9% of cost to hedge, or did you expect to make 18% in your equities and that would take out half of your gains? You got to play the game if you're feeling like it. But one of the things that we hope to do with BinanceUS, kind of in same vein of Binance Global, is really lowering that barrier to entry, whether it's the fees, whether it's the complication of the platform itself, whether it's that intimidation or the demigod status that you think you must have in order to be part of the community. We're really here to show you that it's built by humans for humans.
So recently you announced that BinanceUS will offer users a discount if they use BNB. Can you talk about a little bit, are there any other ways that you see BinanceUS leveraging BNB as a part of the ecosystem, similar to what Binance.com has done?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why we listed it, is BNB has such a great utility within the ecosystem. Lowering the trading fees by 25% is a huge discount upon things. That makes our average user pay about 7.5 basis points on trades, which is already pretty low. So with our corporate clients, they have a significantly, a little bit different of a model given their volume that they're usually trading. But the idea of being able to use BNB for your trading fees just makes it for a much streamlined approach. You're not going to be able to, your balances aren't going to be adjusting on each point. It's going to be pretty easy. The other elements of BNB I see that we haven't yet built in are a lot of the elements around Binance Charity Foundation. They've been able to leverage crowdsourced charities using BNB to get access directly to sources in Africa. We've done 2 rollouts there, where one BNB feeds, I think it's 25 meals for this home, which I'm kind of going like, oh, they're getting something better than what I think $25 could get me here in New York. But the idea that you're able to crowdsource and use this as a new funding mechanism for both projects like you see with Launchpad Labs, etc., but also for a charity foundation, I think we're going to be able to see just the access to and the contribution to different things take place.
And I mean, we've seen some other programs where on Binance.com you can like hold BNB, and also that's necessary for VIP tiers.
Yeah.
They have utility where you need to hold it in order to get access to Launchpad listings, etc. Do you think there will be more of these types of offerings where you can use use that token for something in the future?
Yeah, we rolled out VIP programs last Friday as well. So we have the same or similar tiering where if you are a larger holder of BNB, your fees are even lower than 7.5 basis points. And so I think there's elements to that we can then begin to build in, see a little bit more about what that means for the products we can build in the future. But again, kind of getting people comfortable with the idea of holding digital assets is hard enough. I'm just asking people to register and verify their fiat verification first. Get yourself prepared, and then build out your comfort zone. But you can begin to see the utility that many of these coins do offer.
So you've talked about trading fees a few times, and I think that's an interesting area to explore a little bit further because, from what I recall, you offer some of the lowest trading fees out there. And something that we're seeing in the traditional equities world is we're seeing, at least the brokerages are really reducing their trading fees, some of them going to 0 fees. Do you think that crypto is going to follow that example?
I think that's, in a dream world, why are we paying fees for anything? I'm not going down that path just yet. It mostly affects me personally. When I was over in Hong Kong, I was, 22 years old and covering some of the largest hedge funds in the world, and they were paying very little, even sometimes costing Morgan Stanley to move billions of dollars through, Oregon. And then there I was going to HSBC, trying to move money back for Christmas gifts and getting 8% on a pegged currency. And I kind of just, why was getting out of my neighborhood, my comfort zone, a burden financially on me? I was already being paid, 77 cents on the dollar. I was already halfway around the world. And so for me to not be able to be financially benefiting from that experience made me realize, the easiest answer to this was I should have just stayed in my own hometown and never done anything. Well, what a burden that is on the whole world. If we aren't allowing people to have that access and that exposure, and a lot of that comes down to middlemen and fees. So one thing that Binance, by giving the power back to the person to be able to control their own assets, to manage, manage and grow and develop their understanding of investment, we don't really need to be the bearer of those fees or taker of those fees, I guess. So I think that's one of our pillars is lowering that barrier to entry, lowering the fees. If the fees are what's holding you back from buying your first Bitcoin, then let's move that out of the way. So I think that's something that we can really focus on, helping people realize that there's an added benefit to getting access to this technology. It doesn't have to be, when you pass go, drop the coins.
Do you think that some of the newer retail traders, the new entrants into space, are really paying attention to those finer details, or are they, mostly just going with who they've heard of, or who they interacted with, or who got them interested in the space?
Yeah, I think you can kind of think of it in two ways. One, if you just play to that level, you're going to only get that level of growth. So you play to a cheap audience, you'll only get that. We think about it on such a deeper level of how we're building out the teams, how we're bringing in new voices and participants into this space, how we're offering a narrative that is refreshing, at least in my opinion. I think we're going to be playing here for the long haul. This isn't a quick 2-quarter turnaround in BinanceUS exits. We're really here for building out infrastructure that will let America stay ahead of the innovation in this space and allow for users to access and build out how we see this ecosystem that we're all part of.
Any comments you can make on how you see the competitive landscape evolving, especially as we see more institutional-facing exchanges like Backed? Adam was here earlier talking about what they're doing, and we're of course seeing the expansion of some of these non-crypto exchanges, things like Square or Robinhood, starting to offer crypto trading as well. Can you comment a little bit on the direction that you see that going?
Well, I stand for things still need to change. So I'm okay for new entrants to the market, clearly being one of them. The idea that we've set out and seen a roadmap for the past 7 years of crypto exchanges is a fantastic advantage for myself. Being able to see what's worked, what's not worked, and then to assess currently where we are. I think in general, we are less attractive to repeat Wall Street than we were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, recreating banks might have been the answer for what we see. In my opinion, our next wave of how crypto is going to be adopted isn't repeating what banks are, because the next generation won't even know what a bank is. You've got people that are already accustomed to Venmo being in their hands, rather than having to go to the ATM and watch the little device shoot up to get money when you're in a physical ATM. So I mean, those mechanisms are still something we have to be aware of. We have to understand exactly how large troves of society changes are impacting us. And one of them is fintech isn't new. Like, everyone's been innovating on the process of banks for a while, so how can we be a derivative of that change? And that's something that Binance and CZ especially, this is why I saw so much alignment with them, was he wasn't building something for the next 4 years of growth. He was building something that would fundamentally change how people would operate. So if our horizon line is farther out, we're then able to encompass what's actually changing among us. So whether it's the technology, the communication that occurs within an organization, whether it's the management system that is different than we've seen in a hierarchical corporate society, all of those elements we have to take into account, realizing that this isn't going to be something that I need to perfect in 5 years' time. I need to have it perfecting for a lot longer. So I think those are some of the, a little bit, tinfoil hat on and off, but there's a component to that that makes sure that everything that we work on, we're innovating. So in the component of a traditional team, my team is rather small and scrappy, but what I've done is collected them from places that had already innovated on traditional finance. So we've got a collection of folks from Robinhood, from Western Union, from early audit blockchain groups at EY. The folks that have been able to say, I saw how it worked, I was frustrated, and I need to change it. That's kind of the core of my team, and it's working quite well.
Yeah, I agree. I hope there will be more and more of these new entrants, because it just spreads awareness. And it's very clear to me that we're still in the growing the pie stage of the industry. It will turn into a red ocean where it's a competition over market share at some point. But I think that point is pretty far in the future.
Yeah, and then so many of the projects that I see popping up where I'm like, that's amazing, but what's your, how big is your customer base? I'm just hoping to grow that customer base for you, so that in, a short amount of time, you'll be able to say, well, at least, 45% more people understand what I'm talking about when I'm bringing up network effects or, additional benefits that this technology can give us. There's an element where we've alienated a little bit quickly, which you would do if you saw the light of how digital assets can impact your own life and you're already ahead. But it's lonely out there. Everyone wants to go to the moon, and I'm like, it's going to be a lonely place without a couple friends. So I'm just trying to make sure that we can bring more people, and everyone's got their spacesuits zipped up beforehand. I think that's something that's important. We need to prepare for what's going to be happening down the road, and that's going to require scale.
So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing you in accomplishing that? Is it mostly just time, and it's just going to take some time to get there, or are there any structural barriers in the way?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'd definitely say time always helps, but no one has time when you're innovating at the forefront of financial asset change and disruption. Or when you're working with a team like Binance and they roll out a new software or a new component every week, and I'm like, ooh, put that on my wish list of items that I need to stay up in front of. But the elements for us, we're reaching regulators right now with a clean slate coming in to the United States, complying with the rules of the game. The rules of the game have changed drastically since this first set out. So some of the earlier delays that we saw taking place with these early pioneers, I would hope by now they're a little bit more sped up. We think about bank accounts and banking crypto companies was so taboo that you were getting the bank account shut down rapidly when you first were starting, call it 2 to 5 years ago. Nowadays, banks are knocking on our door saying, we know you're going to be a great business, and we want your flow. And so that's a change in evolution that we're seeing with the awareness that's taking place. So I'm hoping that as we see, we've seen congressional hearings now where Bitcoin shows up more than I've ever seen before on C-SPAN. So hopefully with that awareness, things will be able to speed up and we'll be able to open these markets as we truly do see in, as I call it, a Binance minute, which is roughly 2.4 seconds.
Yeah, I can empathize with banking troubles because I remember, back in 2017 when we were thinking about starting Multicoin, and just like saying that we were going to look at crypto, this caused the banks to shut the door. Like, nope, not interested.
Yeah, and you're seeing like crypto teams from one bank now join another bank and start that kind of knock-on effect of this being a competitive edge for other groups to be facilitators of our businesses, to be welcome to this. So that certainly comes with the mainstreaming of crypto, but also the reason for mainstream is it finds utility and is tangibly beneficial to be a part of this.
Yeah, something that was just really coincidental today as I was walking to the venue. I happened to walk by the stock exchange and I saw that Silvergate was IPOing today.
I had a great day, yeah. Silvergate up 5%.
Yeah.
I was like, no wonder I'm going to get a customer support.
For those of you who don't know, Silvergate is one of the more popular banks in the crypto world. And they really grew their business by being one of the banks that was supporting crypto businesses when other banks were not. And they were able to grow their business enough that they just IPO'd. So we are really seeing the paradigm shift, I think. As crypto is becoming bigger and bigger business, that it, just like you were saying, previously you have people saying, oh, you're dealing with crypto, we don't want to necessarily work with you, and now it's people are coming to you saying, oh, this would be an interesting business, we'd like to be involved.
I think another reason why this is taking form is people are realizing it doesn't have to be 100% of their whole business. They don't have to be a dedicated, finance person to be able to have access to, Bloomberg terminals enough to be able to see charts and make educated decisions. You can be anything and have access to these markets, and it's up to you and your own interest in education to play a part, which is liberating in essence that I may have not needed to dive into foreign exchange in order just to learn how the world worked. I'm a kinetic learner, so clearly I like to do things in order to fully understand them. But wow, I could have lived out a different dream. This is certainly one of mine, but there were other occupations I would like to do, but they came with a cost. They came with sacrificing my chance to have access to growing my capital or understanding it. Like crypto literacy to me is something that I think can really help unlock a lot of folks, and that's really where we are right now. I'm not asking people to be fully wearing all sorts of crypto swag yet. It's just crypto literacy. Let's get you there so that you don't feel intimidated, so that you do know how to make a trade, so that you do know what happens when you've got to use ETH, gas, understanding how it would work if you did have to or want to participate in this space. So with that, it allows that freedom that I think people can access they might not know exists.
Yeah, sometimes I'm torn on that because occasionally I think it's just the abstracted away, right? Like you don't really need to know if you're using some app, like how gas works.
Yeah.
But then sometimes I think education, is really key.
You still need your login, and you still need to know that you can go there, and that's where you can access your ETH. So, and that's where it would take place. So that's the element of. I asked a question recently to just a group of peers, and I said, "Are you scared? Is that why you're not signed up?" And they're like, "A little bit." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll make it less scary. That's one. But then." What's really your hurdle to understanding how something works? I might not necessarily use a new technology, but I do want to know how to access it. So I've downloaded the app and I've played around on it. And I did that with TikTok. I'm fascinated by that world, by the way. But what are these new mechanisms to which people are understanding? And anything really involving money has a fear and a hesitation to adoption. You can download a graffiti app or one that puts your face and mixes it with music in an instant, and there's no problems with adoption. But are you going to download a new app that deals with your money? People are a little hesitant. So getting that conversation, that's a centuries-long conversation of financial literacy that we can begin, and I think crypto's done a wonderful job of making that a common and exciting conversation to have.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that in the future people will be willing to adopt financial apps as easily as they adopt other kind of consumer.
Well, when you see what it can do, it can unlock your access. I mean, Tushar, what were you doing before you decided to go down this path?
So before this, I was in the healthcare IT world. I had actually founded a startup using patients' electronic medical record data to help them find advanced treatment options like clinical trials.
And so your success was really based on that being the core, unbelievable product of the future, correct?
Yeah.
What if you could do that, and then at the same time you got a great exposure to this crypto that just 3x was fantastic? Now your company itself has a much more likelihood of success.
Yeah, I was a little too intellectually obsessed to stay out of this space. Fell down the rabbit hole, as I'm sure you've heard lots of people.
Glad you're here, but you could have multitasked and it would have been fine. Could have had a great company on the side if you just had BinanceUS up and running. But the infrastructure doesn't exist yet, so we're working on it.
So, a couple questions about Binance.com, right? And if you can tell us a little bit more about the relationship that BinanceUS has with Binance.com and how that works.
Sure. So BinanceUS, we're a separate entity based in San Francisco. We've got an office in Washington, D.C. as well for the regulatory side and kind of legal front. And we're able to license the technology from Binance.com. So anything, whether it's matching engine, providing for the fastest speed for transactions and execution, whether it's the wallet, the security elements there that are continually improved upon, or even the globally recognized brand, we're able to borrow those colors, as well as the name Binance part of ours. So the relationship with it is clearly one of seemingly aligned vision for how we see this impacting the world. And the benefit that I have here, having a local presence and the understanding of this market, is that we can also provide a kind of second vision as well. Being able to provide that compliant marketplace for folks with the freedom and diversity of assets that we see as fit. So it still measures to be within the Binance idea, but we could operate entirely separately, really through a series of licensing of the technology we can implement new things.
Yep, and CC has talked about wanting to have multiple exchanges on many continents, many different nations. I think there's a few that are already launched.
Yeah, they've got Binance Jersey, which covers Euro and Pound on-ramps. They've got Binance Singapore, which covers Singapore dollar on-ramps. You've got, I think it's called Binance Lite, is an Australia-based one. So there's all those elements of being able to provide that on-ramp for fiat local pairs. The only way to get more capital into these markets is through the existing capital that exists in local dollars or wherever you are. So those are really important for getting a global adoption to take place. I think the interesting part about the US is it's such a beast of a market that we really needed to have a core focus. So that's why it wasn't able to be kind of covered by the Binance family. There's just a lot of nuance that you need to understand here in the United States, whether it's from the regulation, whether it's from the target segment of the audience and the marketplace, but also one of just, it's a full-time job.
Do you think the longer-term vision is to have an exchange in every nation or every jurisdiction? How do you think it's going to play out?
Yeah, I think we're going to see this across the other infrastructure players as well. Is a natural need to have access everywhere around the world with a common or at least seemingly understandable experience. So whether it is the same API all the way around the world, and that adds for super ease for businesses to be repeated in different areas, or it's just a streamlined approach that you expect excellence at X, Y, and Z components. I think that's really important for us to see. Consolidation, I think, is a little bit farther down the road. I mean, how old are all the banks now that we've seen consolidate between the top 9? It's taken them a while to get there to that point. I do think we are in a hyper speed of certainly seeing cycles take place, so we have to be aware of that. But by no means do we need to start silencing competition to say that there's only going to be 3 players for the rest of digital assets. I welcome new incumbents, with what we can learn from competition. I think that's only a healthy thing.
And so, how's the coordination like between all the fiat on-ramps that Binance has in all these various jurisdictions? Is everyone pretty independent and kind of just like sharing best practices? Is it more organized? Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works?
So Binance.com's fiat on-ramp business is actually organized and run by David Cow and Lee Zhou. So they are focused on opening up the operations in those certain places. And then kind of it's up to those local groups and local teams to make sure that they're successful. It's a little different for the US, where we came in a concept and have built it out to be an actual product. So I think that there's been an easy coordination on my part because I'm responsible for all of it. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but they certainly have done a wonderful thing of launching great exchanges, and I'm able to use their roadmaps as well as plenty of others out there that have been able to be a guide to say this works, this doesn't, or this works, you have to. So we're able to build that out with great ability to look back and see what's worked. Again, I say it from a seat of privilege. I'm able to work on things at a time where I think we're now able to pull our heads up and say what works and what doesn't. And I think everyone in crypto should be doing this right now. We've had, 11 years of the white paper. It's about time we look up and say, all right, is this functional? Does this work? How can we improve? Who isn't getting it? Why aren't they getting it? Those are the questions I'm asking continuously, and then making sure that our product can answer them.
Awesome. Well, we have about 15 minutes left, and I know we might have a lot of questions from the audience. So I want to turn it around, and if we have any questions from Telegram or from the audience.
So you mentioned getting the spot right and building scale and going into new products. Can you just talk to us about kind of maybe 5 years down the road, 7 years down the road, take it further out? Where do you think you'll really be dominant in products, or what will be your highest margin products?
Yeah, I think that's something, although I always tell people slow down before we get fancy, that is also still in the vision for what's going to be happening. So getting spot right is one element. What can you do once you have a well done foundation as you can build upon it? So whether we go from there into derivative markets, or we see additional products that complement that initial spot market, I think there are components that other groups have done, and I'm still evaluating whether they're worthwhile for us to go down and continue. We think of that with custody. You think about that with different brokerage offerings. There are those components yet, but I'm still waiting to see them play out on other players before we commit to them. I do think it's fair for us to recognize that the derivatives market and at least FX is 3 times the size of the spot market. So if I'm going to build something out, I can think the spot market's going to be this, but options and derivatives are certainly going to bring a multitude more of volume and appetite. So preparing to do those right is something that I think we're still in the ways of figuring out. It was really interesting for me to see the adoption of futures come into play when NDFs were a possibility, and yet no one went down that route. So when you're constructing new financial yield curves, it's a little bit different when you don't have those built out yet. So for not having the components that you have in traditional finance, to have both forwards and NDFs, and non-deliverable forwards as well, we've chosen the route of something more familiar with futures. So I think those components still have room to wiggle, but there's clearly that being kind of on the forefront of making sure that they can solidify that as a market component is something that we'll take a look into. The other idea that we see, where does this take us with securitized token offerings? I get that a lot because people immediately think that's going to be the answer within 6 months of how people are going to be adopting tokenization, et cetera. And the complications of launching that in the United States regard around regulation. So even that with futures too, CFTC exactly. So when we think about what the products are and the hurdle or the lift in terms of regulation, it's something that we also are mapping out and timing. As more groups are forging that way for us, we're able to then hopefully see if there's an easier route or a better one or a more common one by the time we get around to it. So, you know, it's not an urgency to be the first mover yet. I've seen a benefit in being a second or a fourth or a fifth mover in this space.
I think we had a question.
Hi, thank you. What are your plans for investors in New York that are based in New York?
I love you guys. Heartfelt love and appreciation. I am unable to operate in all of the states that have made an impact on my life. I grew up in Florida, can't go there. And I educated in North Carolina, can't go there. And the rest of my family lives in New York. So it is beyond frustration of mine that we have a bit of a delay before we're able to be up and live. We are rolling out our money transmission licenses in those states. So that's a lengthy process that hopefully, because we've seen more businesses ahead of us go through the process, we can speed that up. But that's in the cards. Getting them familiar with our business plan, getting them familiar with what we're doing, those will all help us be able to operate in harder jurisdiction states. I think we're even seeing that now with the New York DFS kind of lift their heads up and say, how do we assess this you know, as a mechanism for allowing more innovation to take place? So we're keen and pushing the force on that, because it's clear we can't be a great organization with only 37 states access, leaving out basically the East Coast. So we're keen and working on that. Something for New York investors as well. You know, there's still elements where you can have feedback. So I do advise for you still to reach out to me and let me know exactly what you're looking for in a product that would be arriving in due time. There's still time for me to build all of your features, and there still will be when it does launch in New York. That's something that I think we're continually in that evolution, making sure something works for people. So please provide your feedback to me in the meantime, but I'm working on it.
Have you found that regulators are a bit more educated and easier to work with now? Or, you know, is it still reinventing the wheel every single time?
No, I've seen great growth in the regulators. I've seen a lot actually within their own, you know, jumping from different departments, which I think is a fascinating thing. They've been working on these projects, or the idea around a lot of these projects, for quite some time. So we've definitely seen sharper folks come in, more education. They've been able to have a tangible, okay, so you're like this, but for this scenario. And so as time goes by, more and more people are getting a better sense of what's actually out there. And then it's our job to package it so it's understandable for them. Would love for you guys to stay in touch. I'm Crypto Coley on Telegram. I respond to all my Twitter DMs. I do customer support. So first-hand problems are my problems. So happy to engage with all of you.
I think we have
It's
one
a real
more.
pleasure to hear every nuance. I had a great group of people from Missouri that reached out last week, and they're like, I really love the platform, but I'm going to need something fixed over here. It's like, Missouri? Wow, that's fantastic. How's the crypto population there? And they're like, we're small. We have a team of 14 traders. We meet up once a month and have a great, you know, barbecue. It's like, that is cool. Things I didn't know about. So I think there's an element that as you're learning and talking to the ecosystems, I mean, this is a great room of clearly, you know, overly crypto educated investors. But as you're you know, meeting your peers or walking around, just getting a sense of how these communities are actually growing is something I find rather fascinating.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Catherine. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone in the audience. We really appreciate you joining us today. We're going to be having happy hour now, right here. And so, you know, please do stick around, and we'll have some more opportunities for networking. Thanks again.